Welcome to Talking Meds on the Prescript podcast, engaging conversations about medicines-related dilemmas. I'm your host, Jonathan Underhill. Hello, welcome to the latest episode of Talking Meds. I'm your host, Jonathan Underhill. I'm delighted to be joined today by Laura Angus. Laura is currently the Chief Pharmacy Officer, Director of Pharmacy and Medicines Optimisation for Humber and North Yorkshire Integrated Health Board, ICB, as you know. I've known Laura for maybe 10 years now, Laura. I think the first time we came across each other was when you joined the NICE Medicines and Prescribing Associate Group. And I was struck very quickly by Laura's meaningful contributions to that excellent group. So Laura's had quite a squiggly career, like me. So she's worked in practically all sectors of pharmacy, including commissioning when she was Head of Medicines Optimisation in York, CCG. She's worked in GP practices as a practice pharmacist. She's worked in community pharmacy. She's worked in hospital pharmacy, and also as a teacher practitioner at the University of Bradford, and was a regional professional training manager there as well. Most importantly, though, first and foremost, Laura wanted me to say, she's a mum of 2 boys and also of a crazy cocker spaniel. So you can see how Laura and I get on, because I'm father to 2 crazy kids and a crazy border terrier, who is the apple of my eye. So welcome, Laura.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Lovely to see you too. And thank you for that introduction.
Fantastic. So was there anything I missed there? Tell us a little bit more about your career journey so far.
I think you covered most of it. But I think just to explain, it's squiggly. That's a really great description. So I started off with Lloyd's Pharmacy, a bit of little teardroppers, it's no more. And very quickly moved into the management roles, and then I get bored very easily, and I think that's maybe a trait of our squiggly careers. So I like to try different things. So I did community pharmacy, and then quickly moved into being a teacher practitioner at the University of Bradford, which is also where I went to university. So that was really great to go back there. And then moved into regional professional training manager role. And then I left all of that and moved to the Primary Care Trust, North Yorkshire in York. And you may say we're going full circle. And then worked in general practice, tried hospital for a bit, and then moved through the commissioning side of things, and that's where I've been for the last many years, working kind of my way up through the commissioning side of medicines optimisation to where I am now. And then I've tried lots of different things as well in the past, to do with leadership. I've done my coaching qualification and tried a non-exec director role, so lots of different things. I'm very happy in pharmacy. That's where I get most of my joy out of work.
Yeah, that's an interesting phrase, that the joy out of work. So Atul Gawande, who, as listeners will know, I'm a really big fan of Atul Gawande. He's a surgeon in Boston and has written some fantastic books on how do you improve healthcare provision. But one of the things he said in an interview that I heard recently was, up until the age of 40, in terms of your career, say yes to things. And then when you find the things that energize you, do that, and then start saying no to things when you're over the age of 40. So isn't that interesting? So and if you haven't found out by the age of 40 the things that energize you, or indeed take energy away from you, then you're probably never going to find out. But you've probably found. So I think that's what you've just described there. You found the bit that energized you, and you focused on that, and that is now what you do. Yeah.
Yes.
Isn't that a great way of thinking about it? I really like that.
I'm not sure about the age of 40. That feels a bit young. I think, I'm not. Yeah, that feels a bit young. But I certainly do think there's a lot of merit in trying something out, and that taking energy away or not giving you energy, and going, that isn't for me. And I've certainly experienced that. And I've in my career, I've been encouraged to move into operational delivery roles, for example, an acute trust, but that just isn't for me. I do love the pharmacy side. And the other thing I do love is coaching and mentoring, and I get a lot of energy from coaching and mentoring other people, and seeing them grow.
Yes, similar to me. So I managed a team. I line and managed people. I used to get fairly good feedback that I was quite good at it, but I didn't really enjoy it, if I'm honest with you. So actually, one of my career choices was not to do any direct line management in the later stages of my career, but have a role for coaching and mentoring. Because for me, that was all of the good stuff without any of the stuff that took energy away from me. Interestingly.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah. So I think I'm not convinced about the 40, but the rest of it, yes, I agree. Yes, and I do encourage people to try different things if they don't feel that they've found their niche yet.
absolutely. Absolutely. So I think I know the answer to the next question. Well, I think I know it's going to involve the words 10-year plan. But what's on your agenda at the moment, Laura?
So top of our agenda as an ICB chief pharmacist is the model ICB and the NHS reform. That's been ongoing since the announcements were made in March. So as a chief pharmacist, trying to ensure that medicines optimisation features as it should in the model ICB and in the model region work. I know the rest of the teams, the ICB medicines optimisation teams are, they're awaiting their fate, and there's a lot of uncertainty and anxiety within those teams at the moment. And then the 10-year plan came out, and I think that helps. That adds to the discussions that we're having. So going through the 10-year plan, looking at the 10-year plan and thinking, okay, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for the wider team? What does this mean for pharmacy on a broader more broadly? There we go, get the words out. I think there's that, and then there's the day job. The day job never, the day job never stops. So the standard ICB medicines optimisation work, whilst we're going through all this churn and change, the usual work is coming down the pipeline for us to work through. So it's kind of keeping one thing going, looking to the future for the next thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing that I got out of the 10-year plan as well. It's an excellent strategic vision with some really, really good ideas in there. But I found myself asking lots of questions as to how are we going to do that? How are we going to create headroom to move services from hospital to community or neighbourhood teams or whatever? Because as you say, you've still got people like yourself who still have to do the day job and manage a team and deliver, medicines optimization services in the broader sense to people. So, just in terms of specifics, then, what are these specific bits of the 10-year plan that you think have big implications for pharmacy?
Okay, so I have, I say in inverted commas, which you can't do inverted commas on a podcast. I have read, I've listened to the whole 10-year plan through an app. So I listened to it while doing very long car journeys. And I was quite excited I am quite an optimistic person, but I was excited for that first read through. I was excited by the executive summary and then the first read through. And there is lots in there for pharmacy as a profession, and there's lots in there for related to medicines. I think it's interesting how much they mention AI. Within the 10-year plan, not my area of expertise, but I am slightly worried about how much it seems to rely on AI. And I think a lot of it made sense, that there's a lot of it you just couldn't argue with. It's common sense. It's what we've been asking for years. So, for example, why can't we have an NHS app that is as sophisticated as my banking app, for example? I can pay one credit card and it talks to another bank and passes that money over, just uses my face to recognise me, and it's all done. So the NHS app, to bring that up to scale, and there's lots in there to mention pharmacy and medicines. I think community pharmacy, being part of integrated neighbourhood health services, is key, and delighted to see that in there. Delighted to see the mention of pharmacy more broadly. I'm a little sad, and I said I would mention this about them referring to clinicians and pharmacists as we're a separate entity. We're prescribing. So if you haven't got a clinician who's a prescriber, that's slightly worrying. And then there's also lots of references to allied health professionals where I think they do mean pharmacy as well. What I would say was missing is probably more mention regarding pharmacy technicians and the role that they can bring in their own right as a profession in their own right. And then specific mentions to medicines, lots of mentions about genomics. And again, I worry slightly that so much emphasis on genomics at this stage, whereas my thinking is, where do you treat the patient as a holistic being, not based on some test results? So they're my initial thoughts, but I will pause and let you come in, because I could just talk for 10 minutes straight about this.
Thanks for that, Laura. I think that's really helpful and insightful, actually. I mean, there was, like you, I was struck by some of the phrasing in the 10-year plan. And there was one phrase in particular that really, I'd have this on every slide, I think, and I'll read it. It's digitally by default, in a patient's home if possible, in a neighbourhood health centre where needed, and in a hospital if necessary. And I think that sort of like frames it really nicely. So digitally, if you can do it digitally, brilliant, fantastic. But there are going to be some people who either can't, or for whatever reason, there will be barriers to that for using digital delivery. But they're recognizing that and saying there will be other options here if possible. Most people want to be seen either in their own home or in a place that's near their own home. They don't want to have the faff of going to hospital for an outpatient follow-up when you can either do it digitally by using a video conference or a telephone call, or go to one of your neighborhood teams or locality to see someone sensible to look after you, rather than having to go to the local hospital, fight for parking, walk into a building that's usually a bit shabby, or can be sometimes, and isn't particularly welcoming, and is a bit scary for people. So, and importantly, it's more expensive to deliver healthcare from a hospital than it is in these other settings. So the principle of that is beautiful. But the devil, as we said when we were talking about this with Sunders a couple of weeks ago, the devil's going to be in the detail, because there's still no operational plan that's been published yet. We don't know exactly how this is going to work, which I guess is an opportunity for people like yourselves as chief pharmacists and ICBs, if you like, and the pharmacy leadership, to inform that operational plan, to say, right, actually, pharmacists are part of this. They're a key plank in all of this. This is what we can do, and this is how we can deliver it. So, I know you and people like you and Maul and Vanessa Burgess and others have been doing lots of thinking about this and how this can work for ICBs, and the model ICB, I think, as you say, is all part of this plan. Yeah. So I don't know if you have any thoughts, any further thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that, again, maybe far too optimistic, but I feel like the operational plans will come. They've said they've come, and they'll come quite fast, I think, following this. So I think we'll start to see the how, launched from the end of summer, autumn, and it'll be broken down into the different chunks. But yes, that's exactly what we're doing as model ICB work. Is we are saying to anyone who will listen, actually, is yes, things need to change, and here's how we think they could change. So we know that it refers a lot in the 10-year plan about ICBs being strategic commissioners. Don't argue with that, that isn't wrong. But how you move from ICBs doing what they do now to moving to be strategic commissioners, and how you enable the system to pick up things. So if we stick to prescribing and medicines, yes, you could hand over the entire prescribing budget to an integrated health organisation, or IHO or an IHO, I've heard them call. So I think, yes, you could do that, but you've got to have the right mechanisms in place for them to be able to handle that budget in its entirety. and that's the risk of the budget plus the good side of holding a budget in its entirety. And that's not an easy thing to do, but we certainly think it's possible. So that's the type of thing that we've pulled out, and some, putting the right levers and mechanisms in place. So one thing that again was really pleasing to see is moving community pharmacy away from a model of being paid to dispense medicines, using robotics to dispense medicines, and using community pharmacy to use their skill sets in their entirety. Moving the direction of travel in those ways will be the levers that help to achieve the plan. Not saying it'll be easy, but like you say, there's lots of great brains out there that can add to this, and we are being asked, which is really helpful at a national level, to feed into this.
I mean, we've been talking for quite years, decades, about utilising the potential of community pharmacies and the community pharmacy professions, and moving away from just supply. And I don't mean just supply, because supply is really important, and getting it right and delivering it to people we can't take that for granted. It's really, really important. But there is so much more that a community pharmacy can offer, and the setting as well as the people who are in there. I think, and again, it's just going to be that, how do you move away from that, where you get paid for supply largely, to a model where you're paid to deliver a service mostly. There's always been that thing where, the disincentive for a community pharmacist to intervene on a prescription when somebody's on 25 medicines to get it down to 5. If their income is based on dispensing those 25 medicines on a regular basis, it's almost a disincentive for community pharmacists to do a medication review. They still do it, and they still do it very well. But we need to move away from that and make it easier for people to do those sorts of things, don't we?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, the technology is there, and it just needs to be utilised. So, I would say, I don't know loads about it. As I said, I don't know a great deal about AI, but I think, using a computer system algorithm to pick a medicine based on a barcode has got to be safer than humans picking medicines, and therefore that takes that side out of it. And again, you move that service away to a clinical service, is what they want to do and what they can do, and we just need to enable them. One thing I think is really important, when the plan came out, everybody seemed to, and this is natural, this is what everybody does, and they focused on their slice of the pie, as I would call it. So all the GPs looked at, everything to do with GPs, and pharmacy looked at everything to do with pharmacy. If they don't start to integrate, and which bit can pharmacy do, which bit can general practice do, which bit can the hospital only do, but integrate those services fully, then we'll just end up with what we've always had, and we'll just keep repeating forevermore. So it's, how can it truly be embedded and deliver as part of the integrated neighbourhood health, as opposed to doing something in isolation? And once we have those conversations, then I think we'll start to see the shift. And it's, it started and it's positive. We're moving in the right direction. We probably just need to move a little bit faster.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, the other sort of area within the 10-year plan that's caused a lot of discussion in pharmacy circles is around the single national the single national formulary. So for me, as an ex-NICE person, somebody who's worked in the area of sort of, assessment of medicines and assessment of technologies, and the notion of, NICE does a technology appraisal, it's then integrated into your local formulary and it's made available there. That always seemed to work quite well for me. But people in pharma industry who I talk to would say there's still this variation. There are some organisations and some localities where this medicine isn't actually in the local formulary. And I think that's where this is coming from. I think where the motivation for having the single national formulary is coming from. That sort of that unwarranted variation that either is perceived or real, but that's the idea behind it. I mean, my initial thoughts on the single national formulary were that will never work. They haven't thought it through properly. Now, I might be an old grumpy man who's completely wrong about that. And there might be someone with a vision that says this is how it's going to work. No one's been able to explain to me exactly how this is going to work. And so I do think there's a little bit of a sort of there's lots to be, again, the devil's going to be in the detail around the single national formula. But again, what are your initial thoughts on that, and what sort of discussions have you been having with others about this?
Okay, so I'm not going to take any credit for this, but when we talk to the national team about how could things be different, how can we move to strategic commissioner, how can we implement model ICBs, one of the top ticket items was single national formulary. So we talked to the national team about this. So I and others, and they can take the fall with me or take the glory depending on how this goes. We talked to the national team about single national formulary, and the reason we approach this is because it doesn't make sense for 42 plus, because some ICBs have more than one area prescribing committee or more than one formulary. It does not make sense for those 42 plus areas to do the same thing 42 times over for certain things. So there's a lot of duplication. There's a lot of unwarranted variation. We see that from formularies, and there's variation in uptake. So NICE TAs are an example where it's mandated, they must be put onto formulary. Even then, the time in which that happens varies hugely, and even then, the RAG status, the traffic light status, may vary when they end up on formulary if there's an option to do so. So some drugs are very clear, they're hospital only. You wouldn't want them anything but hospital only, but others, there's variation across the patch regarding what RAG status they're given. So that doesn't make sense. So there's your first kind of start. The second point is that we all have different traffic light status. So a long time ago, it would have started with red, amber, green, and now we have purple, we have blue, we have all different variations of the rainbow. Yeah, a bit of brown, all the variations of the rainbow, which is great in EDI agenda. That's what you want, but not so much in a RAG status. So I think what do we mean by red? What do we mean by amber? What do we mean by that? The next one that I would bring into this is what is shared care? That beast, that's something, we sorted that. So again, shared care, I believe, that was introduced with quite a niche definition when it was first introduced. And then over time, it's become a way of getting general practice to prescribe medicines on behalf of the specialist. Sometimes there's no monitoring, sometimes there's no sharing of care, but then it gets called shared care. So again, if you could define what do we mean? Do we need shared care? Have we moved to acute trusts, hospitals, specialist centres being able to prescribe directly, write the prescription, send it to a community pharmacy? Do we need the general practice to take on that prescribing? Question mark. It's not. I don't have the answer to that. Then we come to all the new applications that aren't NICE TAs. And I don't know if this is true. I did use a well-known AI source, won't say which one, and I said how many novel medicines go through MHRA every year as licensed medicines. So just licensing, this isn't different indications or different uses for novel medicines, and that came out with, there were 53 in 2024. So they're the ones, some of them might go through NICE, not all of them do, and again, we consider them at all different times, and that depends on the clinician's pet topic or interest in an area, or if the pharmaceutical industry have been involved and talked to clinicians. So we get different applications at different times. Again, you could standardize that. So I think you could standardize the governance. So we approach things in the same way. I think you could standardize the NICE TAs. And the other thing, I feel like I'm talking too much. This is a podcast, I guess. The other thing is, if we say something isn't suitable for prescribing, let's say it's not suitable prescribing and not make it available for prescribing, as opposed to leaving this kind of woolly territory. So I can see your face, Jonathan. Do you want to come in there?
Well, And I agree with you, that less suitable for prescribing or not suitable for prescribing thing. And that sounds great. Say, for example, and I'm using this therapeutic area as an example, and I don't know how many there are licensed, but say there were 18 ACE inhibitors that are licensed for the management of hypertension in the UK. And we say there's 18, we only need 12. We're only going to have 12 that are deemed to be kind of, the ones that we're going to use. So you have some criteria for choosing those 12. What happens to the other 6? What do the manufacturers of those other 6 medicines do as a result of that? And I worry that the first thing they will do is take that to judicial review, and then that's just going to hold everything up and clam it all up. And I might be wrong on that, but that's my concern. That's my worry. When NICE were looking at sequencing of medicines a few years ago, so this is where you have, I don't know, 6 medicines available to a particular condition, and you do some comparative cost effectiveness of all 6 options, and you say, right, we'll use A, then B, then C, then D, in that sequence, and you do that, and you think, oh, that would be really helpful and really useful. But when you try and do comparative cost effectiveness of that, it's almost impossible, because the prices change, the evidence changes. How do you then create a whole industry that requires you to stay on top of that? Now, that might be possible with AI, actually. And if you had some sort of really light, agile model, cost effectiveness model, where you could, put in the parameters and it could come out with a different answer, then that might be possible. But practically, what that means for a clinician is, right, what medicine do I prescribe today, first line then? Because what's the sequence today or this month, or and then there becomes problems for procurement teams, because then, like, which medicines are you gonna stock? Which ones are you going to? Because for community pharmacies to stock every single medicine that's available is almost impossible. So that's what I mean about it's not really being thought through. Now, the way you've described it, to say if there's standardization for how local formularies work and what red, amber, green status means and shared care arrangements, fantastic. Completely agree with that. And we have the nice guideline on local formulary committees, how to set them up and how to make them look good. I actually think if we just implemented that and had some uniformity around what do we mean by shared care, and what's the status of this medicine in terms of shared care across England, and indeed some uniformity around what red, amber, green means, and I think that would work really well. I'm talking too much now.
Oh no, it's fine. No, I will continue with my list. So I think what you've said is exactly true. And then so there's procurement, but there's also shortages is another thing that needs to be taken into consideration. I think it's like you say, what happens if you get onto the formulary or if you don't get onto the formulary? The other part that I think is key, which again needs thinking through, is you can write whatever you like on a formulary. How do you get clinicians to, I can't think of a better word, but adhere to it is the best word I could think of. And, if I wasn't on a podcast with Johnny Underhill and I didn't say guidelines, not tramlines, then I might get kicked off. So I think, how do you get the clinician to follow it most of the time? This is the best practice most of the time, but patients are patients. You need to treat them as individuals. You need to do shared decision making, and therefore there may be times where the formulary doesn't quite fit that patient, but you still want them to choose something that is evidence-based, cost-effective, value-based. So all of that is a very tricky area, but I think there is plenty we could do to reduce unwarranted variation, reduce different time and speed of uptake. We have lots of issues across borders. A tertiary centre sees somebody, you want someone to go to a tertiary centre to see a specialist, but then there's pushback about the specialist recommending ABC. So I think all of that, and then how you consider medicines as an option in a holistic pathway of care, not the kind of solution to everything. So things I didn't like about the the 10-year plan, and I don't like this language. I don't like the language about game changers. I don't like the language about moonshot. I think, we risk if we place too much emphasis on the medicine being the panacea for everything. And it's how do you treat a patient in that whole pathway of care, and how do you consider the cost of that? So, what other options are there for that patient? And, what's the cost of treating or not treating? So, yeah, I think in my mind, it could never be 100% descriptive in terms of it wouldn't cover everything as a single national formulary. But if you could get away with some of this variation and some of this duplication, I think that is possible. Whereas if you try to fix the whole thing, that's too big an ask, and all the risks that we've discussed.
Completely agree. I think this is about presenting options for people, clinicians and patients, people to choose from. Here are the cost-effective options. Here are the risks and benefits of all the different options, all the advantages and disadvantages for you as an individual. Which one do we think is the best one for you at this point in time? That's where we want to get to with that, I think. And as you say, it's about standardization for me here, but also within a framework that you've still got individual decision making as well, based on what matters most to the person and what the best option is for the person at that point in time. If they'd have used that sort of language in the 10-year plan, I'd have been a lot happier. Put it that way. But maybe that's what will happen in practice, and then maybe that's what will happen in the operational plan. So
I was just going to say the thing that I would also add, and this might be considered controversial, but I personally don't think that pharmacists, pharmacy technicians, should be in charge of all the products that are not medicines. So I'm looking at all your appliances, all your stoma, all your sip feeds, your dressings. I think we can do the governance, and we should support the governance process, and the governance process should be as robust as we do for medicines, but we're not experts in these things. So you need to work with the experts, and I still fear that the way it's described in the 10-year plan is there isn't that understanding, and there's still an expectation. So the same with devices, medtech. Some of them very clearly need pharmacy support. Some of them, not my area of expertise. You would want a physio, for example, to advise. So I think there's still some people who think we should do all of it. I think, again, if you take those things out of the drug tariff or take them out of prescribing by general practice by the route they are now, you would simplify the model a lot more.
I have some sympathy for that. I think, and I think there's two things here that are separate. There's the supply function, and whether there should be supply through pharmacies, and I can see an argument for them not being supplied through pharmacies because it's probably more efficient for other providers to do that. And then there's something about the evaluation of medtech and devices and dressings. Now that is going to fall squarely, I think, at the feet of NICE and the MHRA. That's what it says in the 10-year plan. And I know NICE already have a really, really good team who work on assessing medical devices. But it's really quite tricky because they're not like medicines where you have quite good evidence from randomized controlled trials for every medicine that comes to market, pretty much. Devices is very different, and the bar, if you like, for assessment and getting something approved for a device is a lot lower than it is for a medicine. So I completely agree. I don't see that as a function for pharmacists, actually, and the pharmacy professions. I think there needs to be other people who are involved with the assessment of those things, and indeed probably the supply as well. There's probably more efficient ways of supplying those things. Anyway, Laura, that's been fantastic. I think we've really got into the kind of the implications of certainly the model ICB, what that's going to mean, the single national formulary. I think, again, watch this kind of this space on that. I think it's fascinating how that's going to develop over the next 6 months. Again, the timeline for the single national formulary as well is by 2026, I think they said. So in 2 years, 2027. So it's not like this is in 10 years' time we're going to do this. This is actually quite soon, and that's quite a challenging time for him, I think. So just to finish off then, what do you think the things that pharmacy professionals can do to ensure they're ready for the 10-year plan?
I would say this sounds really crazy, but read the 10-year plan. I know that sounds really simple, and I don't mean the exec summary. I mean, read it. You can skim read it. The whole, I think it's 168 pages. You can skim read it, and you can get a good sense of all of the 10-year plan, as opposed to just picking out the lines for pharmacy, because you will miss bits. If you just pick out pharmacy and medicines, you will miss bits. And so I think there's some interesting ways that we could contribute as pharmacy professionals to the 10-year plan that might not be explicit or overt within that 10-year plan. So that would be my first top tip, very simple tip. I think then think where you would like to fit, and what you can offer in that 10-year plan space. Again, think more broadly than where it says explicitly pharmacy. Use your imagination as well sometimes, because pharmacy can contribute to so much of this 10-year plan. Again, it might not be overt or explicit. And I think for us, it's really the time with the Royal Pharmacy College, and the UK Professional Pharmacy Leadership Advisory Board. It's our time to say, this is what pharmacy can do. This is pharmacy's place in healthcare. This is what we can contribute. This is our unique selling point. And this is where you need to come for this advice and the leadership that we can provide to the 10-year plan. So again, that's on all of us. That isn't on just a few people that are, working at NHS England level, or working in a room in a, people think of ivory towers and all of that side of things. It's for everyone in the pharmacy profession to contribute to that and use their voice and say how we can help with this. Sorry, that was very waffly.
No, not at all. I really like those three things. I think that there is definitely something about reading the 10-year plan, and we'll put a couple of links into. So the NHS Confederation, for example, have done a really quite nice podcast on the 10-year plan with the wider implications for the NHS, not just not just in terms of pharmacy and medicines. And I think you're right. It's worth reading that. I think there's something about having a think about what can you offer as an individual pharmacy professional. Why you, or why us? Have a think about that. And then I think that you're right, the professional leadership board, I think there's a massive role for them in the future. I've been encouraged by the people who are involved in that. Some really, really talented, experienced people. And I'm looking to them to take us forward, and get ready for the challenges that are within the 10-year plan. So yeah, bring it on, eh?
Bring it on, bring it on. Yeah, I'm excited, and I think it's got a lot in there, and lots of different things for different people. So lots on pharmacogenomics, lots on the digital agenda, and I know amazing colleagues in that space. So yeah, bring it on.
Absolutely. I mean, we haven't even touched on sort of digital and all those sorts of things, but I think you're right. There's lots and lots in there. Maybe we'll do another podcast, Laura, to talk about those specifics. Eh?
Maybe see how this one goes first.
Yeah. Laura, thank you so much for giving up your time and joining me. It's been fantastic. It's always great talking to you. So yeah, brilliant. Thanks very much. Hope you enjoyed it, listeners.
Thank you for having me.